Radishes are crazy fast growing, going from seed to root in as little as 4 weeks. This is the fastest vegetable we can grow, but like any veggie, we want bigger, better harvests, which I practically guarantee with the tips I'm about to reveal. Let's get to it. Before I show you how to sow either directly or into plug trays, well, we've got some planting to do. Now, this little lot here was sown about 10 days ago, and they're really healthy and vibrant little seedlings. These guys are ready to get planted. Now, the advantage of sowing outside of the bed into pots or plugs like this to then plant out is that you can get an earlier start, earlier on in the season when it's still a bit cold. You can protect your seedlings from the likes of slugs and pigeons, planting them out once they're a bit bigger, and you can have the ground occupied by something else while you start these guys off. Now, radishes don't need it very, very rich particularly, but I added about 1 inch or 3 centimetres of organic matter of some lovely well-rotted compost here in the winter, and that should do really well for them. If you haven't added any organic matter, well, you can add it right up to planting time. That's no problem at all. Now, I'm going to be planting these guys today as a little cluster of seedlings. So because of that, I'm going to be planting them in more of a block formation, so they got more space all around them to grow out and away from each other as they kind of expand. I'm going to plant them in clusters of about 4 to maybe a maximum of 6 seedlings per little hole. So in they go, and I'm spacing them about 6 inches or 15 centimetres apart in each direction, which should give them plenty of space. Now, I absolutely love radishes in salads, of course. My favourite way is actually slightly pickled, so through one of those really thin little mandolin things that slices them wafer thin and then pickled, so the picking liquor goes kind of pink as well. Yummy. However, another reason for growing radish is as a natural pest control, and I'll be revealing more about that in a bit. If I was planting these right at the start of the season while it was still quite cold, I'd perhaps finish with either a warming row cover of fleece or something like an improvised cloche. Not only would these keep things a bit warmer to speed along growth, but also protect my radish seedlings from pigeons, which can be relentless at that time of year. What's really great about radish's double quick growth is that it throws open so many ways to sow it. Now, I could sow it direct in the ground, into containers, or into plug trays as well, as I'm going to show you now. So I've got kind of sifted potting mix here, and I'm just going to pop it into my little plug tray and gently firm it in as I go. Now, today I'm going to be sowing an absolute beautiful classic called French Breakfast, and it's a white-tipped radish with slightly longer roots than your standard red round ones, and I reckon that means I'm getting twice as much root for the same amount of effort. So that's a great idea. Like beets or beetroot, radishes come in a range of different colours. So there's yellows and whites, obviously your reds, and your pinks and purples as well. And you can also get rainbow mixes, which include a range of different tones. All the more reason to grow radishes. They're also really good for us, of course, with lots of sulforaphane, I hope I've said that right, to help with reducing inflammation. Now, if I was to sow just one seed into each of these plugs, it would be a terrible waste of potting mix, space, and time as well. So when I'm sowing into plug trays like this, I only ever multi-sow. So that means just a kind of more than one seedling, or rather seed per plug. And in this case, we're aiming for about 5 seeds, 5 radish seeds per plug. Just pop them in like that. And these will go out exactly as they are, so there's no need to thin the seedlings. They'll go out just as little clusters as we've just planted just now. Now, lots of vegetables can be multi-sown like this, and if you missed our recent video on multi-sowing, I'll link to it in the description below so you can go and catch up on that one. And finally, just to get them covered and watered. Now, in this lovely warm weather, these should be up within probably as quickly as 5 days. And then it will only be another 5 to sort of maybe 7 days after that I will be planting them out. So they won't stay in here for that long at all. Try and aim to get your seedlings in the ground quite promptly while they're still quite short. You can see these guys here, they'll probably do okay, but they're a little bit on the long side and beginning to sort of flop around a bit. So you want them in a bit smaller than this. Sowing directly where you want your radishes to grow really makes sense if you've got the space to do so, and it'll save that extra step of planting out young seedlings. Now, it's how I make most of my sowings from mid-spring once things have warmed up a bit. At the moment I'm going to be sowing 2 rows here, and I'm aiming for a sort of width between the rows of about 8 inches or 20 centimetres. Now, the little trenches I'm making here are called drills, and that's what we'll be sowing into. Now, the seeds are quite a good size and easy to handle individually, so in a short row like this, I reckon it's worth taking the time just to space each seed individually. Take your time, don't hurry, and I'm aiming for a spacing of around 2 to 3 centimetres or just 1 inch between each seed like that. Now, this avoids wasting seed and means that you can get your seedlings just so they come up perfectly. Something worth aiming for, I reckon, and incredibly satisfying too. Radishes are cool season vegetables that will germinate in temperatures as low as 41 Fahrenheit or 5 Celsius. This makes them really ideal as one of the very first direct sowings of the season. Conversely, warmer weather can be a bit of a struggle for radishes, causing them to bolt and produce less in the way of good juicy roots. So if you're sowing them in the warmth of summer, maybe pick somewhere a little bit shaded and make sure you keep them well watered. And if you're in a very hot climate, then you may find it better just to concentrate on spring and autumn sowings and avoid the heat of summer altogether. Kind of makes me feel that radishes are my kindred spirits. Right, let's get these little fellas covered over and given a good water to wake them up. If you have a bigger area to sow or don't have quite the steady hand to put each little seed down individually, don't worry at all. Just sow as best as you can and then thin out the seedlings so they're not overcrowded to about 1 inch or so apart once they've popped up. If you're short on growing space, you can use the quick growing, smaller nature of radishes to your advantage. Now, here I had some spare plugs of radishes and I planted them in between my cauliflowers. The collies here are a lot slower growing and won't need the full space here for at least a couple of weeks, allowing me to sneak in a cheeky bonus crop of radishes. Then over here you can see these 2 faint lines here of radish seedlings already popping up, but guess what, there's actually 2 crops in here. I've sown some parsnips and radishes into the bottom of each row at the same time. Now, the logic here is that the radishes, because they're so quick, will mark out the rows, allowing me to safely weed in between and not damage the parsnip seedlings that will come up. And, well, I'll get an extra bonus crop because these radishes will be harvested in maybe just another couple of weeks, and that'll be enough time for the parsnips then to have the space that they need to fill in and produce our next crop. And if you'd like to see the full video on the technique for doing this, by the way, I'll link to it in the description below. So think opportunistically, where can I sneak in a few extra radishes, either in a little bit of unused space or between slower growing or taller crops? And radishes are of course also fantastic container crops. Just sow them thinly, maybe 1 to 2 inches or 3 to 5 centimetres apart, scattered across the container, cover them over, and then once the seedlings are up, maybe thin if necessary, and then harvest in turn as the roots reach a usable size. Radishes are especially suitable for anyone starting out on their gardening journey, being really fast and generally trouble-free. Now, the main way to keep them happy is to keep them well watered, especially when it's kind of hot and dry. Not only will this ensure steady growth, it also means the roots will be at their best. They won't have a kind of woody or potentially spongy texture or fork, and they won't be too spicy either. And as you're watering, it's a good opportunity to just pass through any rows or blocks to pull out or hoe out any weeds you come across. Flea beetles are perhaps the most common pest you're likely to come across. These tiny, shiny beetles get their names because they spring away like fleas when they're disturbed. Now they cause little tiny pitted marks in the leaves that can kind of fray and yellow around the edges. They don't cause a huge amount of problem, but a severe infestation may slow down growth and affect the quality of the root. Flea beetles are most active from mid to late summer, so you can just grow outside at this time to avoid the worst of their raspings, or just cover your crop with some sort of row cover, something fleece-like or just some kind of insect mesh to keep them off in the first place. I tend to find that most damage is pretty cosmetic and doesn't really affect the roots that much, so I do tolerate a little bit of damage. Now remember towards the start of the video when I mentioned that radishes can help protect against pests. Well, some gardeners use the attractiveness of radishes to flea beetles as a kind of sacrificial crop to protect other crops. So by growing radishes around other brassicas like say cabbages or broccoli, the radishes intercept the flea beetles, take all the damage, take the hit, and leave the other crops alone. Another companion planting technique is to plant radishes to repel cucumber beetles. Now studies have shown that radishes actively repel these troublesome bugs, making the unassuming radish a powerful ally for growing alongside susceptible crops like cucumbers, melons and squashes. Watching the roots start to fatten up is a really magical moment. Kind of once they reach that tipping point, they suddenly go for it and suddenly swell. Just go through your rows every couple of days, and as soon as they reach a usable size, just go ahead, lift them up and enjoy them. Now, if you've grown your radishes on from multi-sown plugs and grown them on as clusters, then you may be able to just twist free the biggest root in each cluster, carefully leaving the smaller ones to grow on. I like to harvest the roots while they're still quite young. Just don't let them get too big, otherwise they'll get kind of hollowed out and a bit spongy or woody. Now, nice and young like this, they've got a real irresistible crunch to them. Just magic. Because radishes mature so quickly, you can be sure of a good steady supply of those ravishing roots from spring all the way up to the first hard frosts. But to ensure that steady supply, you'll need to make regular sowings, say 1 or 2 short rows every couple of weeks or so. Now the very first sowings can be made under cover from late winter, and then the last sowings made towards the end of summer or autumn in a warmer climate. And to get exact dates of when to sow in your area, do check out our garden planner. In fact, late summer is the ideal time to sow one of the Asian varieties of radish, like daikon, mooli, or the really rather spectacular watermelon or mantang hong radish. These guys will grow slower but produce bigger roots that are fantastic for cooking and can be used right through the autumn and on into winter. Daikon radish are also fantastic for growing as a winter cover crop or green manure. The big thrusting roots will help to break up the soil, while the leaves will help to suppress weeds. And they're great pickled, so this is what I'm going to be adding onto my late summer sowing list for sure. They're simple souls really, but I happen to think that radishes are rather ravishing. I'll catch you next time.